Me this morning, along with our producer, Justin Hawkins. I'm Will Bowling, joined as we are every week at this time by our good friend Brent Hubbs of VolQuest's On 3 on the sidelines for the Vol Network for Tennessee and Florida tomorrow night as well. Brent, just you and me this morning, and I can't be too mean to Ramon because he may be listening on his way to the airport as well. How are you this morning?
Well, that means we can be even more mean to Ramon this morning is what that means. No, I'm doing well. There's a lot of dust on the bottle since the last time Tennessee got it done in Gainesville, Florida. So we'll see if there can be some kind of celebration come late Saturday night in Gainesville if Tennessee can go down there and do something they haven't been able to do in a long time against a 3-7 team that's more talented than people give them credit to, but they've been unable to, or credit for, but they've been unable to finish anything all season long.
Well, Brent, I want to start with the question we asked Mike Keith yesterday because his answer to this, I never knew the details of. He told us that in 1992 for the Mose Phillips in the downpour game between Tennessee and Florida, he said on Kingston Pike at the studio where he was, there was no rain and that it was just a cell over Neyland Stadium. Brent, I had no idea that storm and literally the deluge of that Tennessee-Florida game was such a small little cell that was just over Neyland Stadium.
What was fascinating about that game, I was in the stands as a student. That was the fall of my freshman year. And the only time I sat in the stands as a student was my freshman year, because after that I was decided I wanted to try to do something in this crazy business we call broadcasting in some capacity. When you're set, and I had great seats for that game, by the way. I don't know how I won the lottery or won a draw. It was very different back then. You just had to go pick them up at the ticket office early. So I was sitting in the lower bowl in I don't know, maybe section D, something like that, throwing some ice at Eric Rhett and whoever I could find. I didn't get there, but I tried. But you could look up, and of course there was no Jumbotron on the north end. And the north end was very different in 92 than it is now. But you could see that cloud developing, and it was coming straight south, basically over Ayers Hall.
Okay.
You could see it. The sun was shining to the west, and it came straight down. I mean, from north to south, straight down. And you could see it coming. And, man, I mean, right at the end of the first half, it just opened up. And it absolutely came a deluge and just kind of camped out there for a bit. And then it went away. I mean, that game started in the sun and finished in the sun. But in the middle, there's one of the greatest highlights in Tennessee history as Mose Phillips goes down the sideline. The other thing about that game is Brent Musburger was calling that game on ABC. And if you go back and rewatch it, it rained so hard at the stadium, they actually lost their broadcast feed for a minute. And then when it came back, it was all grainy because it was raining so hard. Their cameras were nobody was prepared for it.
Sure.
And it just absolutely wiped them out for not a long time, but for a few minutes. And then when it came back, it was not even close to what it was supposed to look like because everything was just soaked. That's as hard of a rain in one small area as I can remember seeing in a long, long time, if not ever.
It was one of my favorite highlights forever. One of my favorite John Ward calls of in the downpour on that run as well. I absolutely love that game. Brent, when you look at the history of this matchup, obviously we've spoken about it all week. What happened to Nathan Peterman or, Josh Dobbs and Quentin Dormandy in Gainesville? That doesn't mean anything for Joey Aguilar, but there is an element of addressing the history and understanding what you're walking into that I imagine that conversation has been had. How do you think Josh Heupel has handled that this week to not be afraid of the environment you're walking into while also understanding the context of what this game means?
Well, ironically, I think you use that in a different context for this matchup than you would for a different game. And you use it from the standpoint of don't get caught up in what you saw with Florida and Kentucky 2 weeks ago. Don't get caught up in a 3-7 record. What you have to understand is this game is different. They're going to show. Florida's not rolling over. And I know some people have thought, well, they're not going to be able to get bowl eligible, and look what happened at Kentucky. I'm just telling you right now, I will be stunned if Florida rolls over and they don't show. They haven't played a game down there since October the 18th. It's a sellout. They're going to honor Urban Meyer. I mean, they're pulling out all the stops, as you would expect them to do. But what you use the history with to the team is Look at what's happened in years past. There is no laydown in this rivalry game. They expect to beat you. They don't have any concerns about beating Tennessee because they always beat Tennessee. That's how I would use it to motivate this team, more so than, well, it's been 10 tries since Tennessee has won down there. You know, you guys, some of you guys have played in this game. You know what you're getting, blah, 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 blah. I would use it from a motivation standpoint to explain to them what they're walking into despite Florida's record.
Brent, I was reading you guys at VolQuest's.com and the matchup article I love every week that Rob Lewis does about the advantage on each side of the football game. When Tennessee runs, when Tennessee passes, and vice versa. And I noticed a nugget in this I couldn't believe. The Gators have the second worst, I believe it's yards per attempt in the SEC this year. 7.83 yards allowed in their pass game. And that being said, they have only faced one SEC team that ranks in the top 6 in the conference in pass offense, and that was last weekend against Ole Miss. Brent, obviously that doesn't matter if Joey Aguilar throws it to them. But what do you make of this matchup when Tennessee passes, and how do you think Joey Aguilar and Josh Heupel address some of the mistakes and some of the turnovers that have undone a lot of the good things that Tennessee has been able to do these past few weeks in the pass game?
Well, let's start with the back part of that question, and then that's addressing Joey Aguilar and the interceptions. And the thing Joey Aguilar has to understand is the next play is not a bad play. What you can't have is you can't not have a next play by throwing a silly interception. And what I mean by that is that there are 2 of these last 4 interceptions, particularly 2 of them stand out to me. The one at the end of the first half against Oklahoma, he had some pressure around him. And instead of being able to step into the throw or just throwing it away, he tried to throw it 30 yards down the field just with an arm flick. Okay, well, that creates inaccuracy. He did the same thing against New Mexico State on the second interception. Somebody's at his feet. He can't step into the throw. He just kind of flips it with his arm about 25 or 30 yards downfield. It sails and ends up being an easy interception. What Joey has to do is the footwork can't get sloppy. And if you can't get yourself in a position to get your footwork the right way to step into a throw vertically, don't throw it vertically. Now, he threw the little 5-yard play to Star Thomas while somebody's draped all over him, but that's an easier throw to make. But go back to week 1 against Syracuse. What did Joey Aguilar do in the first half that was perplexing to everybody? The ball was high. The ball was high on some out patterns, and he missed some throws, and I wrote about it, and people were like, well, the receiver got their hand on it. Well, they're having to climb the ladder for everything, even on receiver screens. So when I asked Josh Heupel about it, Joey was not setting his feet very well in the RPO game. He was getting out of whack with his lower body. He has got to be more sound with his footwork and his lower body to be able to throw the ball accurately down the field. I think that's the thing he can address to himself. And he also has to understand it's okay if you take a sack. You don't want to, but it's okay if you get sacked. But more importantly, it's okay to throw it out of bounds and move on to the next play. And I think Joey's just gotten greedy and tried to force a couple things the last 2 weeks when he was not in a position to accurately throw the football. So he has to do that. That goes to my second point. Tennessee's got to protect up front in this game. All the stats, and those are great stats that Rob had, and he does do a great job with that matchup piece. But the thing they have to do is they've got to protect. We don't know what Wendell Boy is going to be able to do, how much he's going to play, or what his status is going to be. That's a Florida defense that has not recorded a bunch of sacks this year, but they had 5 last week against Trinidad Chambliss. Tennessee's going to have to protect the quarterback to give Joey Aguilar a chance to do things that he wants to do, throwing the football. And Tennessee's going to have to run it to keep some balance. Tennessee's 1-3, Will, when Aguilar has pass attempts of 35 or more in a game. So you got to be careful. Don't get just too pass happy. The last Tennessee quarterback to throw for 300 yards at Florida was a guy named Peyton Manning in 1997. I mean, Casey Clausen didn't sniff 300 yards in his 2 wins down there in 01 and 03. You're going to have to find a way to have some balance and run the football effectively, too, I think.
Brent Hubbs of VolQuest, our guest this morning on Ramon and Will. To that point, Brent, in the run game, what are you hearing about Peyton Lewis's status? I know he's questionable last night on the injury report, and I'm with you and everything you've written about this running back rotation. It makes no sense to me how Tennessee has just gone totally away from riding the hot hand, and it feels choreographed a lot of the times. They're putting running backs in or out of the game. Do you have any understanding of why Josh Heupel is doing that? Is he trying to keep guys on the roster? Is it their promises they made before the season? And does that still happen tomorrow night in the Swamp, where you're making these kind of pre-planned rotations at running back when Deshaun Bishop has had the hot hand a lot of times?
Well, they've always had, not always, but I should say Darrell Sims the last 2 seasons has always had a plan, second series of the game, to get the second tailback in the game. So if you go back and look last year, even with Dylan Sampson, a lot of times when Bishop was healthy, now when Bishop got hurt, it changed. But when Bishop was healthy, you go back to Oklahoma. I think Bishop's first carries in the Oklahoma game, Tennessee was coming off their own goal line on the third offensive set of the game. So they've always rotated after 2 series. The difference last year and to this year is they were rotating 2. This year they're rotating 3. So because of the heavier rotation, if you choreograph it, which is exactly what they're doing to start the game, Bishop could get, like he did last week, he got 4 carries on the first drive. They threw the interception. On his second drive, he got 1 carry, a 1-yard touchdown run, and then he sat till the second quarter. And I don't like that, to be honest with you, because if a guy comes out of the gate hot, like Bishop was, I thought, last week, you keep running him. And then you rotate whenever you rotate. But they have been pretty choreographed in what they're doing in the first half. With Peyton Lewis being questionable, my guess is Peyton Lewis is probably going to be more of an emergency deal only. He's practiced very little this week. I think he'll travel. I think he'll still be questionable. Then I think he'll probably be available, but it would be in a limited role. So I think the rotation shrinks. So it's just Deshaun Bishop and Star Thomas. You'll see a rotation in the first half, but I think they will get to the, quote, hot guy faster than they have in most games this year, where they're trying to rotate 3 guys, I guess for the purpose of keeping everybody involved, happy, whatever the case may be. I just felt like that. I still feel like Deshaun Bishop is better carries 15 through 25 than he will be 1 through 15. I just think that's his running style, Will.
Brent, when you look at this Tennessee defense, it feels like as maybe the offense with the turnovers has taken a small step back, the defense is quietly taking a step forward. And just 5 missed tackles the last 2 weeks. How has Tennessee gone about addressing this, Brent? Have they done things differently in the week of preparation? Is it just young guys kind of learning on the job and getting better? What do you think is behind Tennessee starting to finally take some better angles and not give up as many explosives just from missing tackles?
Well, it depends on who you talk to over there, Will.
Okay.
Players have said that there's been a greater emphasis placed on tackling the last few weeks. Josh Heupel acknowledged after the Oklahoma game during the open date that they did some things different in practice. Tim Banks suggested that they really didn't, and they always emphasize that they just performed better. Whatever the case may be, whatever they've done, they have certainly created better angles, and they've put themselves in better position to make tackles, particularly with the first team. I did not think in the fourth quarter their angles and their tackling was very good against New Mexico State.
Sure.
But everybody, it's a 42-9 game, and it's a bunch of guys who hadn't played, so everybody's kind of throws that out. I think the other thing that's helped a little bit too, Will, is you haven't played, your last 2 opponents haven't really scared you over the top. So you can play a little more downhill. So instinctively, you're just kind of coming downhill. I'm going to be curious to see. Florida's not a big play offense. I think they've got something like 11 completions of 30 yards or more this year. They do not have a run of over 30 yards. They don't have a 30-yard rush.
Wow. So
they have not been a big play offense. They've been a little more of a control deal. Now, they hit a big one last week in the passing game. But does Tennessee continue to kind of crowd forward and play things a little tighter at the line of scrimmage? Do they play more aggressive? You look at Ty Redmond. I don't think the last 2 weeks Ty Redmond's been afraid of getting the ball thrown over his head. So he's squatted on the slants a little bit more. He's played tighter coverage there. The result is he's got like 5 pass breakups the last 2 games. Does he continue to play with that aggressiveness on the road against Florida, or does he back up a little bit? Same thing with the safeties. If your first step is backwards, then you have a chance to get out of angle. If your first step is to come downhill and run the alley, then Edris Farouk looks a lot better, as he did against Oklahoma, than what you saw him play against some other teams, namely Kentucky, where they really struggled, some other games where they averaged 12 missed tackles a game. So part of it's who you're playing a little bit. Part of it, too, is I do think that they're playing at better angles. They're forcing the ball back into the middle of the field where their help is. They haven't given up a soft corner as much. All of those things contribute to better tackling. We'll see if that continues this week in Florida.
Brent, we've been on Jermod McCoy watch for quite some time. We had like a ceremonial final Boo Carter question with Austin this week. It feels like we're getting to that point now on Jermod McCoy playing football for Tennessee, and maybe this is our ceremonial final Jermod McCoy question, Brent. With him out again this weekend, is it safe to assume that his career as a Vol is over?
I think you could probably stop making the popcorn for the watch party.
Okay.
I do. I just feel like at this point, I mean, why would you play next week and that be your only game? Because you're probably not going to play in a bowl game if you're him. You probably never were. And just at this point, why play? I do think this, and I know some people are going to say, he was never going to play, and, he just, he took money, and it's, blah, 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 blah. And I get all that. I will say this, for 2 weeks, the last 2 weeks, everybody you talked to said he did more the last 2 weeks than he's done the entire time since the injury, trying to ramp up to play and to play this game and to play the Vanderbilt game. I think he's dealing with some knee soreness as he's ramped it up, and I think as he's talked to some close to him, I just think the decision has been, you probably ought to focus on the Senior Bowl or the Combine or whatever your next step is in your NFL journey. There's nothing official from Jermod McCoy. This is all speculation on my part. But I just think if you're out this week and you're not going to be a part and you didn't practice this week, that tells me you're not ramping it up for the last game of the season either. So I don't think he's going to play at Tennessee, which is extremely unfortunate. He has tried to get back. I do believe that. I don't think he's ever mailed it in on this program or the fans or the team. I just don't think he's healthy enough to play, or he doesn't feel comfortable enough to play. Let me rephrase that.
Well, Brent, in the way that you evaluate this defense this year, I feel like there is always going to be, and maybe I'm wrong for even giving this a platform, but the fire Tim Banks crowd is always just going to want to fire Tim Banks. Like even last year when Tennessee goes to Ohio State, there was an element of the fan base that I think overreacted to that and held him too personally accountable for things that are kind of out of his control. I think the same can be said about losing, in a lot of ways, your top three corners from last year, and Ricky Gibson, Jermod McCoy, and the version Tennessee had of Boo Carter last year, they've not had this year really in any context. Brent, what does that mean for Tim Banks moving forward as the defensive coordinator at Tennessee? For the folks that put a lot of pressure and criticism on him, I get there's always going to be that loud opinion, but where does the kind of the balance lie, I guess, Brent, in your mind between, yes, Tim Banks has not been perfect, but also this defense was always going to have some challenges this season based on what they lost from last year?
Well, I mean, first of all, he should get credit for what they did last year because he's the reason they went to the playoffs. Okay, and that's whether a fan wants to believe that or not. Without what they do last year, Tennessee's not a playoff team. That offense did not get them to the playoffs. That was the defense that carried them into the college football playoffs. You knew that, you thought there would be some type of a little bit of a step back this year. But you think about last December where they thought they were, and it was going to be an all-conference corner and Jermod McCoy, maybe an All-American corner, who's going to, projected first-round draft pick. Ricky Gibson, who you thought was going to have a chance to be an all-conference corner this year. He put on 25 pounds. He was a different-looking player, had a really good preseason. You lose him 19 snaps into the season for the year. And then Boo Carter, as you mentioned, didn't take the step. And, I mean, you go get Colton Hood, even if Boo Carter doesn't take a step. If Jermod McCoy and Ricky Gibson are healthy, what does that secondary look like if you're playing Gibson, McCoy, and Colton Hood at nickel?
Oof.
It was pretty good.
Yeah, pretty good.
And so, I mean, they were building a lot around those guys, and then they don't have them. And it has an effect. And to Tennessee's credit, to Tim Banks' credit, he's never made an excuse for it. I don't think Tim Banks, not because he knew something, but I think Tim Banks' belief from January on was, I'm not going to have Jermod McCoy. So how do we play this thing? Well, we're going to play it with Colton Hood. We're going to play it with Ricky Gibson, and then Boo Carter is going to take a step. When Boo Carter had a solid spring, remember they worked him on offense. He was all engaged. And then in July, he decided to do whatever it was he decided to do by not showing up. And that changed things there. I think the other thing that gets overlooked a bit with this defense, and maybe it was the workload that they had early in the year, the injury. I mean, Bryson Eason has had an okay year. He's not had the year we thought he would have. I thought he was a guy who could climb some draft boards. He's been banged up. He's played too many snaps because of the injuries. They have not gotten the inside push on their defensive line that I thought they would get. And they haven't played the run as well on the defensive line as I thought they would for whatever reason. So, there's just been a variety of things. But at the end of the day, I mean, Tim Banks making $2 million to get it fixed. And everybody's going to hold that, rightfully so. I mean, he's getting paid a lot of money, and I do think it's a defense that's gotten better the last couple of weeks. I'm curious to see how they play these last 2 weeks of the regular season, as maybe they found their footing a little bit. But then you look at that, and your best tackler at middle linebacker is playing with double turf toe. At linebacker, and Arion Carter, he's not been himself the last 4 or 5 weeks. It's just one of those years where they have been, unfortunately, really beat up and really banged up, and they just haven't executed well. I think that's the other thing for fans is there was just too many occasions where they looked lost on defense in the back end. Guys are just kind of throwing their hands up, looking at each other like, how's that guy running wide open? Well, we busted that coverage. We busted the zone coverage on 3rd and 18 for a first down, et cetera, et cetera. Those types of things, I think, could sort of jump out. But did the defense play well enough to beat Oklahoma? I mean, you take away the 10 points the offense gave them when you talk about the fumble and then the interception right at the end of the first half. They give up 23 points in that game. Is that enough to win? If I'd have told you going in, Oklahoma scores 23, who are you taking?
Tennessee.
Right?
Absolutely.
You're taking Tennessee. Yeah, they gave up the 4th down against Georgia, but Josh Heupel didn't exactly try to put the game away when they had the turnover, and then Tennessee misses the field goal. Gave up too many points. They've given up too many points. They've also given, Tennessee a chance, and Tennessee's had a chance with their offense to win some games. They just didn't get it done. And it's a defense that's not played to the standard that Tim Banks and everybody at Tennessee has. They've got to go in this offseason in the portal, get them some help, and then they've got to retool some things moving into next year.
He is Brent Hubbs of VolQuest's joining us Friday mornings at 7:20 here on the show, on the sideline for Tennessee and Florida, courtesy of the Vol Network, of course, here on the station tomorrow night. Brent, have a good time. Enjoy it. Not a lot of gap between fans and players and people on the sideline, as you know. I imagine it's going to feel like a bandbox down there, but have a good time. Have a good call tomorrow night.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Will. Have a great weekend, buddy.
Yes, sir. Brent Hubbs of VolQuest joining us this morning, presented by our friends at Ascend Federal Credit Union, your financial partner for every stage of life.